So gather around, little children, and I will continue the chapters of the rabbit, the man, and the dog. And, so we have on the internet, they have a thing where you have either feedback or you could tweet or something like this, because I don't do any social media. I have no social media, and I don't. But my people, they bring me, reports, and I always tell my people, I don't read anything. I don't like to read. You show me the picture, and they say, "How can we show you a picture?" It's blurbs. It's like it's tweets. It's text. They text you, so they give you your feedback. I said, "Show me the picture." They said, "We can't draw a picture of this. This person thinks you're not defining the man." They're wondering, who is the man? They said it's the man. He drove away in a golf cart in a big, spacious, beautiful estate with a driveway that was developed back in maybe the 1930s or perhaps earlier than the 1930s. And it was so well done. It was pristine in the 80s or the 90s or whenever this story takes place. It was the 2010s. But the driveway is perfect and the landscaping is perfect. And they have the only place in America where there's chestnuts and elms and there's chestnuts and elms and some other beautiful landscaping. It's like hydrangeas, 20 feet tall hydrangeas dripping with giant big plumes of flowers, florets of flowers. Everybody's wondering, how could they do it? It was a long time. They planted it long ago, and they nursed it and they preserved it and they made it established. And they said that you made a driveway that was so beautiful and gorgeous, and you took a right-hand turn out of your driveway. You drove up your beautiful road, and you took a right-hand turn at the next block, and you got on the sidewalk, and you went up the road a little ways, and you crossed over, and you got on the golf course property with your dog. But they're wondering, on the internet, they're blurbing or blogging or they're tweeting or TikToking or all these things. They're doing a social media thing where they're saying, well, how's this man? He's poor. He's stupid. He's so stupid. The man was an inheritor. So I don't want to define the man, until it's organically appropriate. Once it comes up organically, we will define the man. But so you're making me define the man. The man was very dumb. Other people were wondering, the man had a certain amount of street smarts, a certain amount. The man has a certain amount of intelligence. Here's the thing. Everybody said he was an idiot, a savant. And they tried to make him play the piano, and he couldn't play the piano. He had a drowning situation. He almost drowned. His grandfather saved him, but I think he had some oxygen deprivation to the brain. And perhaps because his brain had been deprivized when he slammed into the rabbit's temple to temple. Scientists eventually said it was because the rabbit's head was jarred so much that it had a chemical distortion, it had a chemical reappropriation. But perhaps there was a sharing. Nobody believes this. It's the people who say you don't want to get the vaccine, but you want to take horse medicine. But there's the people who say they want you don't think they had it was the rabbit had a jarring so bad, but there was no interplay of but the man, he had such a damaged brain that perhaps he had space in his brain. Perhaps there was damaged areas of his brain that were allowed to, they grew on their own. They weren't encumbered by the normal activities of a brain or the normal thing of time or the normal evolution or everything. The brain wasn't developing or going onwards or aging properly. There was dead zones in the brain, these dead zones, they could do whatever they wanted. Perhaps they had a little bit of a secretion that when the rabbit's temple and the man's temple slammed together. So perhaps it was part, you could take the vaccine or you could take the horse pill. Who knows? You could take a horse pill, you could take some vaccine. No one knows. But it might have been that the rabbit's head was just, slapped so hard against the man's head that that's how the speech developed. It was not a physical, but a chemical thing. But perhaps it was a little bit physical where the man exuded or put out a little grease or a little from his pores into the rabbit's head. And they were both unconscious for a long time. And the man, the man laid on the rabbit, and the dog pranced around. The dog didn't know what was going on. The dog pranced around, and the man laid on the rabbit. Maybe some secretions developed from his, a couple of fractures, microfractures in his temple to the rabbit's microfractures. Some ooze and some grease came into the rabbit, and maybe the rabbit became, maybe it was a thing where the rabbit had chemical exposure, chemical change, but also the man's greasy, dead zones from his brain, his oxygen deprived brain oozed something to the rabbit. So this is how they thought it happened. But if you want to look back, the man. Yes, if you want to define the man was not that smart, and he couldn't have achieved all these things on his own, but he was an inheritor. The man was an inheritor. So the man, his father was a great veterinarian and as very wealthy, and had a wonderful estate, and we're not even going to discuss certain things about his estate. And had coin collections and stamp collections, and also he had a very small, minute, but it was very, very, very rare pornography collection. And this is what got the man started on his business, his sideline business, his under the radar business. He imported pornography comic books from Uruguay, and he imported very, very strong, very, very deadly fireworks from Lithuania. And this is what the man, he ran out of the back of he inherited a veterinary clinic, and he had a good a flea dipping pool. Perhaps this was part of the problem of the man too. He got into the dipping pool, and he would agitate the dipping pool with the flea medicines as if he was in some kind of with an ice bath or something to do with the NFL players. It was like a thing where they did it was a convalescence of sorts, a rehabilitation. But the man thought if the NFL players, they get in ice baths and they agitate them, or they get into some kind of jacuzzis, healthy jacuzzis with salts and things. He thought if he got into the flea dipping thing and agitated it would be good, but it wasn't. It was very bad for the man. I think this is what did the man in eventually, and perhaps this was made the man more inebriated or mentally handicapped. But he inherited a very, very prosperous veterinary clinic, which he promptly ran into the ground. And he had no veterinary skills, or no, I shouldn't say that. He had he had idiot savants veterinary skills, but he had no veterinary qualifications. He had no degrees or any kind of documentation that this man was qualified. But he had a vast collection of tiny instruments. The man had the only collection in North America of tiny instruments that would allow him to operate on a squirrel, a sparrow, a rabbit, or a moth. The man was the only man in North America who could do an operation on a lunar moth. And the man would go out into the hills, and he would wait for the lunar moths to come out in the dead of night where the moon was shining, and they would perhaps fly around and smack a tree or smack a windshield, and he would save them. He would do an immediate operation, triage. He would do a triage. He had 5-6 lunar moths lined up so he could do an operation. He had tiny instruments, so tiny that you couldn't even see them. He had a thing like a monocle, like a thing for a jeweler. He would look down through the jeweler. It was like a microscope he attached to one eye. He said, okay, now I'll do a little. And it was like fiber optics. He would operate on the moths, and the moths would fly away. The moths would fly away and lay their eggs and perpetuate their species. If it was not for the man, perhaps the moor moths would have been extinct long ago. But the man, he read the veterinary. He was a self-educated veterinary man. There was no documentation, no schooling. The man, he had read the veterinary, but if you wanted to, interpret the man was basically an inheritor. He inherited his beautiful estate. It was a brick house. It was very rich with cherry wood paneling and pillars of oak all through the house. It was beautiful. The man's father had a love for hardwood, exposed hardwood, and marbles, and he had hired a vast a vast platoon of Italians to come and make his driveway, and to lay his driveway, and to board his driveway, and everyone commented the man's driveway was the best. But the man, when he had saved the rabbit and things. By this time, he had already engaged in flea bath, jacuzzi episodes. So it was already melting his brain a little worse than he already had. And everybody suspected, it was rumored that the man had in his past a very bad drowning incident where he was drowning, and his mother, who was a very wicked woman, and we won't get into this in this part of the story, or we probably won't even get into this in this portion or in this entirety of this telling of this tale. But the man had a very wicked woman for a mother, and the mother, everybody said she was trying to have an abortion. The boy was like a 6 or 7, and the woman, she thought if he tips over, he falls into the water and his head first, and his little legs are kicking up in the air, because she bought him a boat, a little styrofoam boat. And in this boat, there was a lawsuit waiting to happen. If in this day and age, if you had this boat, you would be sued astronomically, because it was a styrofoam little sailboat with it was a good design. It was a styrofoam, like a styrofoam cooler. It was a thick, shaped like a sailboat, or shaped like a arrow. And there was a little place, a little satchel in the middle for the boy to sit in. His legs poked through as if, you were going to swing or something along these like a swing of a diaper combination of swing. But he had a little satchel for his legs to stick through and cradle his little butt. And so he would paddle around. He was so happy. But if you didn't pay attention, then you could tip over. The boy reached out to grab a rope from a sailboat. Yeah, I'm almost to the rope, the boy said. I'm going to grab it. He was 6 years old. He even said it out loud. He said to himself, I'm going to grab the rope. And he tipped forward and he tipped upside down. And the mother, from the corner of her peripheral vision, she said, oh my goodness, this is finally my chance. This boy, I'll abort this boy. 6 years old, I'll let them drown. And the little boy's grandfather came running. And the little boy's from up on top where he was frying. He was frying up some Johnson Brotville swats, some things, some sausages, some Johnson Brotwell, schwatzens. They were called schwanzens back then because they were half pork and half something else that no one even knew. But they were like schwanzens, and they were like a sausage and a brat and a combination. Johnsonville had them for a very short period of time, and they called them schwanzens. No one liked it because they thought it sounded too penile. It sounded too much like a penis thing situation, but no one cared because they just eliminated it, because then it became Johnsonville Brats. But before it became Johnsonville Brats, it was Johnsonville Schwanzens. But the old man, the man's mother, when the man was just 6, his mother is down at the edge of the lake, but the grandfather was up trying to barbecue. He was barbecuing some of these sausages or whatever you would call them, and the old man came running and pounding and jumped in and saved the boy and picked the boy up. The boy had already suffered some oxygen deprivation. He had suffered a little bit of oxygen deprivation. So when he became the man, and the man's father had passed away, and the grandfather and the mother, they were all gone, he was by himself. He lived in a beautiful estate, but he chose to live in his little apartment that the man's father it was the grandfather who saved him, but it was the father who kept him up and provided the little apartment. The man, he stayed in a little apartment and didn't live in the house, and he kept a little fort in the vast, massive 2 or 3 car garage, and he kept a little fort, and this is where he transported the rabbit to the clinic where that they had. The man preserved the clinic. Actually, the man's father and his grandfather, they had preserved and left a situation where you called it where they have the thing like it's a university where they endow. It was an endowment to keep alive the veterinary clinic, but the man. He had a vast array of little tiny instruments that he would always operate on, everything from lunar moths to squirrels and sparrows. He had a very precise, very dedicated to just rabbit, and this is how he saved the rabbit. But he ran out of there was a front. He didn't have very many customers. There was a front for his illicit fireworks and comic book pornography enterprises. But the man, if you're wondering why the man He was very dumb, yet still very, very wealthy. He was an inheritor. And this is the rabbit figured this out. It took the rabbit several years, perhaps into the 10th or 11th year. It took a long time for the rabbit to understand, because he was enamored with the man. He thought the man was wealthy beyond his own merit. But there was a certain amount of merit, because, they say size is a talent, inheritance is a talent. Being an inheritor is a talent. If you are a big, giant person to play basketball, you're not too smart, you're not too athletic, but you can make a living playing basketball. You're a big, beefy, giant, enormous person who can be a lineman in the NFL, but you're not too intelligent or not too hardy or you don't work too hard. You're not too, virile, but you have a giant amount of size. This is a talent. And being an inheritor is a talent. You could be an inheritor. You have my talent. What was my talent? They could ask you. What was my talent? I was an inheritor. I inherited a great amount of wealth. But the man, besides his other talent, besides being an inheritor, was his humility and his frugality. So if you have great talent of inheritance and great talent of humility and great talents of frugality, you can perpetuate what your people left you. You can perpetuate it. And this is what the man did. And so everybody was wondering, how come the man could be so stupid and couldn't parlay a rabbit into a monetization, a rabbit who could speak? It's because the man, he couldn't, the man was, it was an inheritor. His talent was inheriting. His talent was humility and frugality. So he was stumbling. He was trying. He was boxed in. He couldn't achieve anything on his own. He couldn't assess or come up with anything so good. But, he paid for his own little apartment with his illicit trafficking of fireworks and pornographic comic books, and he had a wonderful relationship with the dog and the rabbit, and he was very happy. This is all he needed, was the dog and the rabbit and the golfing. He enjoyed the golf, and he enjoyed his estate, and he enjoyed his little apartment, and he enjoyed going out. If you could walk out into your big, vast estate house, all you had to do is walk out, and you could turn on a chandelier, and the chandeliers in all their giant living rooms or their giant dining rooms, they had dimmer switches. You could make it bright, and it was as if you were gazing onto another universe or another sun. Or you could turn it way down, and it gave a glow, like you could, it was like an expensive glow across all this hardwood, this cherry wood and oak. It was as if you could walk around. You could look at crystal chandeliers. You could look at well-stocked giant bars. It was a wonderful thing. You had everything. You had shag carpets. You had so many wonderful accoutrement, and so many touches, and so many design features, and spiral staircases, and so much hardwood, and so much craftsmanship, because the man's father and his grandfather invested so heavily in craftsmanship. So if you walked out of your little tiny apartment and walked into the vast, the ballrooms and the pools and the giant indoor swimming pools and the billiards rooms and the exercise rooms and all the man loved to go up in the northwest portion of the house, and it was unassuming little maid's quarters, but had a bathroom that got the southeast sun of the mornings. And the man, he would sit on a commode in a maid's quarters, and the sun would blast and splash and wash over him. He would sunbathe in this, sitting on a commode in a maid's quarters in a very remote part of the house, and he would just sunbathe. And he discovered this place to sunbathe because the man was a little pudgy, and he was a little, he didn't like to be so white, so he liked to get a little suntan to hide his pudginess a little bit and make him look a little more virile, a little more healthy. So he'd go up, and he walked up a spiral staircase and down a long corridor, and he took a few turns, a little step up, a little step down, and he found himself in a maid's quarters, neat and tidy, a beautiful little thing, and put his apartment bedroom to shame. His apartment sleeping quarters were to shame with his maid's quarters. And he went into the maid's bathroom, and it had a big giant window, and the southeast morning sun came shining through. and he would sunbathe, and he would bask in the sun, and he was so happy. And this was as if you were traveling to a remote foreign country, or exploring another part of the world. And he would go back to his little tiny apartment, his little tiny hovel, his little tiny apartment that the man had deigned for him to have, because he thought the man's father thought the man was a little bit of a retard. And so the man, he would venture out and he would explore, and he would find new things all the time, new encyclopedias, new sculptures, new handcraft, carvings imported from Africa that he had never noticed before. It was a beautiful thing to go explore his estate. He didn't even have to go outside. When he went outside of his grounds, it was uncanny, because he had an endowment, so he had a few people come, a few Mexican men, and they would keep the estate up with all the horticulture and all the flowers and all the landscaping. The man was very happy. But bottom line, the man was an inheritor. He was humble, and he had a frugality that made it so he would exist. And he was a happy man. He was a blessed man. He was one of those people that had won a lottery multiple times over. He had won as if he won a lottery. He was so blessed. He was so blessed repeatedly. But he shared these blessings, and perhaps this man was so blessed, some of his blessings rubbed off on this rabbit, and perhaps that is how the rabbit gained the speech. But if everybody's questioning, why was the man so stupid, but he was so wealthy, now perhaps you know. Now this chapter perhaps defines the man a little more clearly for you. Maybe now, little children. So I don't have to get no more TikToks or no more tweets or no more things, no more Twitters or everything. Nobody has to do nothing more. Nobody send me no kind of a social media. Because I don't have to answer no more social media. It's a good thing, because now you understand. So everybody should share this. Share it. Push the share button so now everybody can understand. Now everybody can be happy. Now everybody can understand. You want to say Twitter? Twit to what? Now you know. Twit to what? Now you understand. Twit to what? Carry it on. Share it. Do something. Because now this has been defined for you. Now you have an understanding.